Doors closed. Oh wow, there's no delay anymore. That's
If I
good.
need to clear my throat, I hit the mute?
Yes, and hopefully that works.
Okay. And it'll just bleed into that mic.
It's all good. It's all good.
All right. When you guys are ready, I'll be ready.
You're rolling?
I am now.
We're here at Jazz Live San Diego with John Campbell. John, welcome to Jazz Live San Diego.
Thanks, Vince. Nice to be here.
So, when was the last time you were here in San Diego?
I don't recall.
Really? So it's been a long time. Well, that's good. We like to welcome people back into San Diego, and that's great. So you're here with a trio tonight. Tell us who you're playing with.
Well, it's originally the Joe LaBarbera trio, but Joe was called away out of the country with a family issue, and so Duncan Moore is subbing very ably for Joe, so it's turned into my gig, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And the great Darek Olis is playing bass, and we are just going to play a few of Bill's tunes and maybe a standard along the way.
Excellent. So, do you play with Darek much as part of the Joe LaBarbera trio?
Well, we did one gig in August, and we played another private party before that about 2 or 3 years ago.
So not a lot. Well,
No,
that's good. We
not a
like we like kind of spontaneous shows, and we like how that works. And,
Yeah, it's working out pretty well, actually.
excellent. And I wanted to kind of note some San Diego associations with you that you may not even come to mind, but I was looking on the internet and found that you played with Charles McPherson.
I did.
There's a YouTube video that we've posted out on our social media sites
At Anthology.
at
Yeah.
Anthology
Mhm.
that includes you. So you play. Have you known Charles for a long time?
Well, I met him a number of years ago. I stepped in for Randy Porter at a gig up in Glendale that Randy wasn't able to do, I guess, or something. So I kind of came in at the last minute, and Charles and I hit it off personally and musically, and so I was doing a number of gigs with him, and at one point he was doing one night a month at Anthology for about a year, I guess, almost, or something like that. So I was coming down once a month to play with him, and we've done a handful of other gigs here and there. But I haven't played with him for a long time, and I really miss it because he's unbelievably great.
All right, great. So Charles, if you're listening to the interview, John wants to play with you.
Hire me.
James Moody is
Yes.
another name that popped up, and James Moody was someone who made his home here in San
Yes.
Diego for a very long time. Tell us a little bit about your association with James.
Well, he would always say Moody, I mean, so I mean, nobody ever called him
That's
James.
great. You can call him Moody.
Yeah,
That's
somebody
fine.
called him James, he would go Moody. So no, when I lived in New York, I was fortunate enough to do a couple of tours with him. I actually played with him first when I lived in Chicago in '83. I want to say he came to the Jazz Showcase, and did a week with him. There may be a 4-night week or something there, but it was great. And then moved to New York and didn't play with him right away. But then he called me for a couple of things. We went to Jamaica, we went to Mexico, we went to Europe, and just so great. So I'm so very fortunate to have played with Charles and Moody. I mean, the greatest.
Yeah, and San Diego's great to have had them here, too.
Exactly.
So let's talk about tonight's show, a Bill Evans tribute show, and let's talk about your association with the music of Bill Evans. You started playing piano when you were 7. You played, as you just mentioned, at the Jazz Showcase for a very long time as in a trio setting.
Here and there.
For a long time in Chicago. When were you first introduced to the music of Bill Evans?
Well, when I was a teenager, I had listened to jazz ever since I was a little tot, but I hadn't really come to Bill's music until I was a teenager, and I really started getting into playing jazz. Before that, I just listened to it, and it was great music, and I just loved it, but I didn't know really what it was. So then I started getting into it about 13 or 14, once I got into high school, and started picking up on everybody, Oscar Peterson, and then just it branched out from there, and I finally got to Bill, and had a few of his records. I know I found the Everybody Digs Bill Evans record with Philly Joe Jones and Sam Jones. That was one of the first ones I got. Found that at an apartment sale or something for $1, you know. So
Amen for people selling their albums.
I know,
It's
it
good
was,
stuff.
it was great. And then I got, I can't remember, the record with Jeremy Steig, which was a really interesting record. So I remember those were a couple of the first ones I got. And I really dug him. I really liked the stuff that was really swinging. You know, so those two records were very swinging and had some beautiful ballads, but that's what he's usually known for more than the swinging stuff. And he would always say in interviews that he wished people would really have would tune into the swinging part of his playing more than the ballads, because that's naturally what everybody would associate him with, you know, the ballads and stuff. So anyway, I listened to him. I wasn't nuts about him. I loved his playing and certain aspects of his playing, but I wasn't a total Billophile until, well, after he passed. You know, I kind of got into it. I did meet him. I played in a band in 1978. We opened for him at a club called Amazing Grace in Evanston, Illinois, when I was living in Chicago. And he had Philly Joe Jones and Michael Moore on bass. And so we played these 3 nights and played, you know, sets in front of their sets. And I met him before the first day and shook his hand, and that was basically it. I didn't talk to him the whole rest of the gig because he was sitting on the couch backstage with Philly Joe Jones and just talking, you know, so I didn't want to interrupt. And it was a very brief meeting, but he was gracious and very nice guy, and I think he was worried that I was going to put the piano out of tune, but I didn't. I'm pretty sure I didn't. You know.
Well, so that's very interesting that you would talk about the differentiation between Evans and his introspective ballad playing and his more swinging playing, because everything I read and I hear the music of you is associated with, and Scott Yanow has written several biographies and reviews and talks about your powerful playing, which is something, as you know, you even just made note of, we don't really associate with the music of Bill Evans, but that could be the swinging part of Bill Evans.
Well, he's one of the deep swingers, you know, I mean, always was.
And so that swinging type of music, is that something that really kind of grabbed you into jazz?
Absolutely.
Being that part of jazz, the rhythm part?
Yeah, because the first guy I remember hearing and loving, flipping over when I was literally 3 or 4 years old was Errol Garner. So he's my man. He's the whole beginning. And you know, if you can't like jazz through Errol Garner, you gotta go have your head examined or something, because there's no one guy that emits more joy through music to me. And Bill Evans loved Errol Garner. In fact, Bill Goodwin, the drummer that played with Phil Woods, told me a great story a couple of years ago about he had Bill Evans over to dinner and asked Bill what he wanted to listen to during dinner. And Bill Evans said, "Do you have Concert by the Sea?" So that's how much Bill Evans loved Errol Garner, and he always said so in his interviews and stuff.
So since we've mentioned Concert by the Sea, have you heard the new reissue of that? And what are your thoughts on the tunes that they've put back in? Because it's like an expanded version
How
of
great!
that.
How great it! You know, my friend Jim Duran, who wrote the Errol Garner biography, called The Most Happy Piano, sent me a copy the day it came out. And so I got it right away. Through him, I had gotten 4 outtakes, but they were really poor quality that he had gotten. I had the cut of Laura, I had the cut of I Covered the Waterfront and Bernie's tune, and The Nearness of You. So, forgive me.
No, that's okay.
Anyway, I had those 4 cuts, and then I kept asking Bob Belden, because Belden was my friend in New York, and he always had a tie-in with Columbia, and I kept asking, when are they going to come out with this? When are they going to come out with this whole concert? Because I know they've got it, and he just never knew or never let me know. So then they finally did.
Yeah.
You know.
And it was one of the top releases of 2015 last year. That whole reissue of that.
Well, to say something to that, it came out in September. So I mean,
right.
For the last 3 months,
Right.
or something of the year to have made that, you know, that's something.
Well, another of the kind of milestones in jazz from a jazz radio station is the series of solo works recorded at Maybach Recital Hall. And those, every time those came out, we were always playing those on the station. They were always very high quality. And you had, I think, volume 29 of Live at Maybach. And what is solo piano work something that you do often? Well, how was that experience recording solo for that series?
Kind of nerve-wracking, but
Really?
I mean, just because it was, you know, it was a thrill to do it. But you know, I'm in there with some pretty heavyweight piano players too. So I worked pretty hard trying to craft those tunes into where every tune kind of went through a couple of key changes, or at least one key change. And so that was more of a harmonic arranging kind of project for me than the actual playing. But the playing came out okay, you know. So I was pretty happy with it.
It's and I have to say, as I've looked through that series, your volume is looked at as one of the better ones in that whole volume.
thanks.
Some of the reviews are very good of that. So
Yeah, that's nice to know.
let's also talk about your work with one of the great interpreters of vocal music, Mel Torme. You worked with Mel for quite a while. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with Mel and the work you did with him.
Yeah, just under 4.5 years, and just out of left field, got a call from his manager. Jay Lenhart, the bass player in New York, was kind of helpful in getting me in there, and George Shearing was actually very helpful because I knew George, and George had heard me play a couple of times, and he and Jay and Al Cohn actually, who was leading the Marty Page Dectet for the first gig that I did with Mel. The first gig was at Avery Fisher Hall, which is now David Geffen Hall. So that's my first gig with Mel. You know, oh my God. So
nervous?
yeah, a little. But those 3 guys kind of collaborated to get me in there, and I didn't audition. He just hired me, and so for 2 gigs, that gig and then an upstate gig at Saratoga Springs with just a trio and Mel, and that was my trial by fire. You know.
And Mel was a swinger. He liked to swing.
Oh, a natural, completely natural guy. Such a great musician. He's a terrific piano player, arranger, terrific drummer. You know, so it was a really great experience with him.
So I mentioned this, you and I talked a little bit about this off mic, but you're also a vibraphone player. Do you get to play vibes much?
Hardly.
Really?
Hardly ever. I sold my set before I came out here, and I'm at some point going to get another set. But
How long have you been on the West Coast?
14 years.
Really?
Uh-huh.
So it's been a long time then since you've played the vibes.
Yeah, well, every once in a while I'll run into a set and play them. If I have my mallets or somebody else's mallets, I can play a little bit, but not a whole lot. So I'm looking to get back into that because I love it dearly. I would like to say again on the vocal end of it that in addition to Mel, whom I loved playing with, obviously, but my other I did play a little bit with Cleo Lane, but I also played with Eddie Jefferson. And I'm on the last, that video of Eddie Jefferson at the Jazz Showcase 2 nights before he got murdered. And so I'm 23 or something like that on that, but that was my trio in Chicago that was on that video with Richie Cole and Eddie, and that was a definite highlight.
Eddie Jefferson was another swinging, soulful kind of guy.
Ridiculous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the next time we talk, we'll get into that a little bit more.
Sure.
John, are there places where people, people are on the internet now, people that you connect with? Do you connect with people on the internet?
I do not.
Okay, I was reading somewhere that I think it was Neil Tesser said, I'm glad John called me because I think he's the only person I know that still doesn't have a computer. So, well, we will make sure that people hear your music. It's an honor to have you here at Jazz Live San Diego.
Really.
Thank you for
very
coming
much.
down.
My pleasure.